Hi everyone. Today we'll be wrapping up Interview with the Vampire by reading part 4 of 4, and that involves predominantly reading the rememory portion at the end, Making Trouble, Cryptonomy-Style, Anne Rice, Bloodlines, and Charting New Destinies in the Blood, or the Rememory of Older Mothers, featuring Mom, as in my mother. We'll be reading that predominantly. However, we'll also be covering something else that I'm excited to announce, which is the book attached to said introduction, or vice versa. My 8th book, the Reflect volume, is mostly live. So before we read the rememory portion, I thought we would go over that. And also, in the same video, now that the book volume is basically live, which this introduction attaches to, it's part of a series of older writing and YouTube videos that I will be revisiting over time. And I thought what I would do is include a sample. And the sample that I have is my Chernobyl review from 2019, which I wrote 3 days into 2020. So that's what I have planned. We'll start with this, announcing my 8th book, the Reflect volume, volume 5, not including the extra modules, and we'll go from there. So yeah, what we're going to be doing first is reading my announcement for the Reflection, aka Mirror volume, followed by my Chernobyl review, and then ending with the largest thing, which is Making Trouble from part 4 of Interview with the Vampire, and then some footnotes and various other things tied to those at the end. My 8th book, the Reflection volume, is mostly live, May 10th, 2026. The 8th book in my Sex Positivity series is live, the Reflection, aka Mirror volume, Eat Your Heart Out, Borges. Mostly. It's entirely written, the material primarily of old saper work and short blog posts, and horror-themed YouTube videos that I'm reading and responding to after coming out as trans, but also an introduction written in 2026, Interview with the Vampire. I just have to finish assembling the PDF file, and then we'll do the video series tied to it, starting with my reinstated review of the 2019 HBO miniseries Chernobyl, which until a few days ago Google had removed, forcing me to re-upload it. Until I do, you may check out its online promotion, The Sphinx's Riddle, where all the material is already accessible and age-gated. This skeet gives further safer work and not safer work screen caps and summaries. Past volumes have all featured models other than me on the covers. This volume is different insofar as I appear on the cover with someone else. To keep this post safer work, here's a safer work promo poster of the cover models, similar to the book covers, myself and the lovely Kuwu. As for the inside of the volume itself, it contains, again, a new introduction with several essays written in 2026, but mostly catalogs old blog posts and videos dating back roughly 12 years. Note, to anyone who cares, RE from Volume 4, but still applicable here. Like the other volumes, I appear in this book as a sex worker doing sex work, RE about the author, i.e. defending sex work and reminding people that it's part of the larger unpaid side of labor that Western Marxism and Marxist-Leninism historically ignore / prey upon, through the universal class subject is white, straight, male, and paid as extensions of the state, sharing these same vampiric qualities in bad faith. R.A., a Gothic researcher, responds to Woke is Dead, featuring John the Duncan. See State Vampirism. Also, communism is a daily effort that continues out of the past into the future during the present. I illustrate this concept repeatedly in the book volume itself, but refer to Essay 11.25 in my latest book is live and Continuing Communism featuring Jesse Gender for a quick demo, which also unpacks this post /volume and germane sources. For something even more conversational and recent, but still based on the same holistic, intersectional, and good faith ideas of exchange, meaning across different cultures and oppressed groups around the world, refer to intersecting discourse, inviting two different Muslims to discuss trans-indigenous rights, and Essay 10.5, Black Moderate Stone Challenge Fascism, R.E. the Birdman, 2026. Purse. Content warning for this post, discussions of rape, see disclaimers at the bottom of the page for the volume content warnings. Artists, placeholder for the cover images, which are quite not safe for work, Kuwu and Persephone Vanderwoord. Volume contents. First, the mirror volume divides in three, i.e. blog posts, YouTube videos, and future material, with some additional paratext before and after these. Note, this post's actual contents are color-coded. It only has the volume summary and on vampires and rape prevention, anti-predation, and the synopsis to state vampirism and disclaimers at the bottom of this page. Go to my website, the book promotion, The Sphinx's Riddle, to see the rest of what you see here, as everything else is very not safe for work. Volume summary on vampires and rape prevention, anti-predation, concerning state vampirism, disclaimers. Volume 5, A Chance to Reflect, volume opening. Foreplay, refrain, state vampirism and older works. Different paratextual bits from Volume 4, recycled in 5, namely the new introductions to YouTube videos, symposiums, and older writing 2014 to 2021, refrain. Back to the Future, From the Past, blog posts. The blog posts ranging from 2015, where my blog begins, until July 2022, when I started sex positivity in earnest. Full Circle, YouTube videos, refrain. The YouTube videos from 2014 to 2026, with news summaries / reactions. But wait, there's more. Taking Gothic communism into the future. Any interviews, essays after Volume 4 to be added after the initial release, not including Interview with the Vampire. Front to back, future reflections on old things, or remembering that little dragon from my past, a note about Kuwu in 2026. Of Worms, Witches, and Wallflowers, a 2026 prelude before Interview with the Vampire. Artist Naya Blue cited challenging the state's manufactured consent and stupidity with vampires, 2024. Volume summary. Volume 5, or the Mirror volume, considers reflections on my past work having led up to my book series and its system of thought, Gothic communism. Said reflections, or holistic study returning to old things happening after said series was written. In other words, whereas Volume 3 covers the informed, intersectionally continuous application of successful proletarian praxis, meaning as we reinterpret the Gothic past pushing for universal liberation, and Volume 4 puts that to practice, preserving our work and public nudism in practice, then Volume 5 is me reflecting on all that came before and how it helped shape what resulted, especially an emphasis on vampires, dragons or otherwise. This includes Kuwu, the model and old flame, sharing the outer covers with me, on something of a little dragon I've written extensively about in said series already, from Volume 024. It dates back to 2014, when I was only just beginning to exit my shell, and which happened primarily by meeting cuties who radicalized my life heading into Gothic communism, an ode to eggs. To that, the notion of praxial synthesis through workers' social and love lives are a huge part of what Volume 5 offers, i.e. from a reflective state, its paradoxical perspectives dwelling on the past and its occupants brought poetically back to life in ghostly forms, to consider the vampiric, or otherwise monstrous feminine, potency useful to us, when reversing state predation, while furthering Gothic communism, vampirically among ourselves, love is a battlefield. Dragons all the way down, babes. Approximate volume length, words, pages, and unique images to be determined, minus the original paratext material, not including new paratexts for Volume 5 specifically. Note, every volume contains the same paratextual materials, paratextual Gothic documents, and audience art and reading order, as well as the full series acknowledgments, glossary, and disclaimer. Much of the unique paratextual materials for volumes 1, 2, and 3, and for volume 4, are contained in their own paratext compendiums, appetizers and leftover rice, respectively. For even more information about the paratexts, refer to Front Load series paratexts in the one-page promos table of contents, Pers 424, 2026, e.g. Takana from Midnight Vampire, above, 2024, Soon the sun sets and the night falls, our feminist fearmonger back for seconds, making guilty men afraid, squirm, or otherwise think twice, as she castrates their doubles on stage. For her and us, it's sweet relief, but also returns to and from the beckoning grave. Whoever said chivalry was dead. Source: Vampires in Claymation, featuring Takana's Midnight Vampire, 2024. Power is something to be under, cuts both ways. The Gorgon's a renegade and loose cannon, with loose morals, someone who handles their shit with aplomb amid hot, cold strength and fragility. On vampires and rape prevention, anti-predation. This volume explores vampires and their rape prevention, anti-predation qualities. Apart from Takana, above, I write on Blue Sky when promoting the volume promotion's release. This is the big one, the one I've been waiting for all my life. Sort of. It catalogs my journey towards my later work, and I'm very proud of it. The theme of the series, this book volume, is vampires, inspired by Kuwu, but also my mother. Another theme is healing from rape, i.e. during the horror's ultimate revenge against the state, making rape systemically impossible, and eliminating the use of scapegoats accordingly. Source: Skeet, Vanderwart Art, 510, 2026. Rape meaning, from my definition, to disempower someone or somewhere, a person, culture, or place, in order to harm them, generally through fetishizing and alienizing acts or circumstances, socio-material conditions that target the mind, body, and or spirit. Rape can be of the mind, spirit, body, and or culture, the land or things tied to it during genocide, etc. It can be individual and or on a mass scale. Source: Psychosexual Martyrdom, 2024. Skeet, alt text, Biff Tannen from Back to the Future, taking out his frustration on George McFly for standing up to him, interrupting his assault on Lorraine Bates. He is much stronger than George, and there's seemingly nothing to be done until the do gang up on the bully. A film I enjoy but critique in equal measure. Quote, Marty's plan is terrible for several reasons. Not only should it not have worked, it presents George McFly as the self-made man, when in truth the entire coercively manufactured production made it possible for him to get Lorraine back despite never earning her to begin with, then take all the credit after privatizing it in his novel. Back to the Future is easy to like. Dialectically, materially, it's a giant dangerous lie. That's not just Reagan's 80s in a nutshell. It's something that's continuously being sold to the next in line as wholesome, good, and safe for workers, making them stupid. To borrow from Anita Sarkeesian, though, I can enjoy Earth Angel, re-recorded, with the orchestral accompaniment, and refuse to endorse Ronald Reagan, Robert Zemeckis et al. In the same breath. Unquote. Source: Challenging the State's Manufactured Consent and Stupidity with Vampires, featuring Kuwu, 2024. To that, I still get survivor's guilt for my own rape, despite all these books, but also that of my mother's and of Kuwu's, of all women, those treated like women, who survived or didn't survive. Get off her. Stop it. God damn it. Why doesn't anyone do anything? Trauma isn't something you escape, but live with to break the cycle. This goes not just for women and children harmed by the state, but also men, e.g. my grandfather being a Holocaust survivor, though he was only 10 when the Nazis invaded Holland, and 15 when liberated, already fighting as a boy to free his land, warts and all, from fascist rule. Rape apologia is rape apologia, my work concerned entirely with the whore's revenge, denying the pimp his prize. For rape victims, vampirism and its carnal sensibilities and piercing stare, Exhibit 1, further down, denote a kind of morbid charm, fatal attraction, a one paradoxically useful to surviving future abuse. Once abusers clock you as victim, third time or otherwise, while topping from below, controlling the room through sex as much as threats of force, but also hyphenating those through complex trauma, PTSD, psychosexual trauma, and scars, which healing from rape always leave during Ludo-Gothic BDSM. The Western world is generally a place that testifies to its own traumas by fabricating them, i.e. as markers of sovereignty that remain historically unkind to specific groups, that nevertheless survive within them as ghosts of unspeakable events linked to systemic abuse. Trauma, in turn, survives through stories corrupted by the presence of said abuse. There is a home resembling a castle, where a ghost, often of a woman, lurks inside, having been met with a sorry fate. But undeath is something that can be felt through echoes of ourselves that aren't diegetically spectral. They feel spectral through an uncanny resemblance, like standing over our own graves. This becomes something to play with during Ludo-Gothic BDSM, akin to an, at times, humorous, even trashy gallows theater, rife with dark, forbidden language, sin, vice, violent sex, all-around death, and other taboo subjects discouraged by privileged and unimaginative moderates who historically frame the Gothic as a puerile, good-for-nothing backwater, while simultaneously suffering from conservative delusions of privilege and or tokenism, R.E. Frederick Jameson. In other words, the pedagogy of the oppressed faces its classic foil, tone policing. Source: Healing from Rape. Both pieces featuring Kuwu, whose testimony and tutelage helped me formulate Ludo-Gothic BDSM, i.e. returning to Volume 1 2 years later, give or take, after 5 books, are Kuwu's hand in forming Ludo-Gothic BDSM, 2025. This includes fictional reenactments of women who died, like Maria Falconetti in The Passion of Joan of Arc, Exhibit 1, further down, 1928, but also the ghosts of women killed by pimps, husbands, fathers, and boyfriends, etc. My mother, when she was homeless, saw a pimp kill a woman before her very eyes, and though I never saw it myself, the image still haunts my nightmares, asleep or awake, which the rememory of older mothers from Interview with the Vampire shall explore more, regarding Mom's teaching of me and her own photographic ghosts, Exhibit 0, further down. A very special set of skills, one acquired over a very long career, that makes me a nightmare for people like rapists. I speak of the Gorgon and her own rape, the OG horror, R.E. Always a Victim, 2025. See also Elizabeth Hadley's More Than a Monster, Medusa Understood, 2024. Artist above. Oxidian Castle cited Vampires in Claymation. To that, rape is a weapon that turns women into monsters, cis or not, and while we can reclaim it, R.E. Our Sweet Revenge, 2025, the fact remains that monsters are made. This includes rape survivors fetishized by pimps, post-rape and or post-mortem. But whatever they do to us, we can still attack during Ludo-Gothic BDSM by fetishizing ourselves, rape play calculating risk while changing the world around us through the abuse that shows in our eyes. Turned by Athena into a weapon that paralyzes and castrates anyone foolish enough to dare try again. Sticks and stones goes both ways, motherfucker. You get one shot, so make it count. Adding fuel to the flames. This includes the terror of simply seeing the shameful sorry dead, sex as a weapon, i.e. which rape canonically equates to, and which horrors reverse abjection with, by cryptonymically evoking the dead, often their former selves, below. Exhibit 0, artist left, cited the rememory of older mothers from Interview with the Vampire. Tim Jacobus, middle and right, models Regina K. Walters, footnote 18, and Melody at the time Vanderward. Cops don't prevent rape. Rape survivors or their ghosts do. Exhibit 1, artist, top left, Kuwu, cited, cropped, challenging the state's manufacture consent. Bottom left, Maria Falconetti. Right, Pam Vam Chaos, cited, arrows for my quiver, from quality beyond measure, remembering Jonathan Joss, 2025. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. However, while the token Amazon declares to any would-be witch, you stand before my lord and kin. If you touch him, I will smite you. The subversive variety values herself, and all women, and other victims of state predation, as the things to protect from witch hunters, with witchcraft, which the Malay call makutu, and sometimes that translates, in Gothic, to a wide variety of things having the whore's revenge, making would-be abusers uncomfortable enough to think twice. Even big strong men with community backing will hesitate if they think the attempt will cost them. Gaslight this. Regarding Exhibit 0 and 1, this book volume, like a mandala, wipes the slate clean by setting its exhibit numbers to an egg-like 0, though it still references the older numbers from earlier volumes, as is. And lastly, concerning state vampirism, this piece, essay or otherwise, is part of a larger series on state vampirism. As I conceive it, state vampirism equals feeding through the state meta-objection, be it openly capitalist or Marxist-Leninist, of which I give a variety of information that you can pause and read, or go to the page yourself if you want to. I've read it before, that's why I'm not doing it again. And then the disclaimers for this particular volume, which belongs to my Sex Positivity book series. And I've read this before in the same basic shape and form, so if you want to pause and read, you can. It gives information about it being read on my YouTube channel, disclaimer regarding essay contents, content warning, and information about the keywords. Next, we have Chernobyl 2019 review. January 3rd, 2020. When I sat down to watch HBO's Chernobyl, I remembered a video from Thunderfoot on YouTube, busting the science the miniseries portrays, and while he's not wrong, I was surprised to find how little it mattered, considering how much I enjoyed the show. Granted, I'm not a scientist, I'm a gothicist. For me, science takes a back seat to constant dread, suspense, and horror, a trifecta the show maintains with ease. Update 5/11/2026. After some deliberation, I've decided to write a new paragraph to page for every old essay I'm responding to for Volume 5, or YouTube video, but that's a separate portion. I.e. per all my old blog writing and YouTube videos, already compiled and going into the volume PDF when it launches. My revived review of Chernobyl is to be the first of many over the next month or so, and one that will appear in Part 4 of my video miniseries on YouTube, Reading Interview with the Vampire, the introduction to Volume 5, 2026. There will be others, generally saying something alongside Volume 5's promotion, The Sphinx's Riddle, and State Vampirism, something vampires, states bad, etc., hindsight 2020, skull equals theft, yada yada. I'll probably say a bit more on this one, given my interest and my mother's interest in Eastern European studies, meaning after the Cold War, but especially their failed nuclear program following Stalin's death, and notable erasure from state politics, i.e., state vampirism critiquing Stalin and company's continued predation, doing so through Marxist-Leninism, notably being Sino-Soviet alongside Western capital, i.e. the price of rice in China, 2026. Blame is shared if uneven. Even so, the bourgeoisie own everything stolen from workers, thus bear the lion's share of the blame. To that, all states are bad, the state white, straight, male, and paid to modular degrees, i.e. Understanding Vampires, 2024, i.e. that scapegoat different things to maintain control, including nuclear power, while keeping people in the dark, mid-game of telephone, above. Revisiting in 2026, every structure has a weak point, the point of failure in Promethean stories and mad science, however dualistic, a human one. To that, workers generally feel the cost of such things, most immediately through tragic if brave heroism. The signature sword compensating for engineering flaws induced by efficient profit, a bourgeois ultimatum-grade willingness to throw away human life through a multi-step, if disguised, feeding mechanism, and generally upon executive to bureaucratic corporate grids and branches, word games, i.e. crew expendable, when chasing profit and or productivity as fire of the gods, the numinous aka Radcliffe's Black Veil, r.e. Radcliffe's Refrain, 2024. Fuel is fuel, and lies fueling the flames through said heroism is ultimately unnecessary save for said motives. In any event, my opinions of Chernobyl have shifted a fair bit since first viewing it. I still consider it a great Gothic story, the ghosts of Mother Russia's gravesite coochie nuclear holes. However, I see now more than ever its success as Red Scare demonizing nuclear power, a Trojan horror to blame. Not great, not terrible, indeed. Kernels of truth remain among the shit, and scientists lie and tell truth through an ongoing gray area, what the Stragutsky brothers in Roadside Picnic, 1972, a year before Le Guin's Omelas, or Solzhenitsyn's Gulag archipelago, ominously called the Zone, re Red Scare, or Out in the World, footnote 19, 2024. Artist Alex Andreev, illustrating roadside picnics, fearsome grinders, above, cited, Leaving the Closet, 2024. There's truth to glean by critiquing Soviet missteps and lies, but generally want to be done by nuclear experts, non-state politicians, and parallel showrunners, assisting dying competitors to nuclear power, mainly fossil fuels, e.g. T-Ful's Nuclear, a nuclear expert, not politician or showrunner, closing his eyes above and shaking his head, specifically doing so when hearing of Soviet submarine K-19 and its accidental trolley problem. Lieutenant Boris Korchalov, commander of the reactor control group and a favorite of the captain's. He volunteered to lead the first team. The captain then walked into the door of the reactor room and asked him if he understood what he was going into. Korchalov then replied calmly that he understood. The captain then answered him, quote, "It is hard to send people to their death. Go with God." Just minutes later, Korchalov came back vomiting. Source: the most agonizing nuclear submarine disaster. Timestamp: 2537. Everyone wants to die for the revolution. Translation: the state for so-called tankings, and de-Stalinized ones at that. Before that, Fultz actually says, "And you know it's bad when you don't have backups, and you're going to have to depend on some sort of act of heroism to protect the core. You know you've failed as an engineer when your defense system relies on heroics. As the saying goes, you do not want people to have to rise to the occasion because people will fall to the level of their training to die for the state, which is why you design robust systems." Same idea with nuclear reactors not in submarines, wherein the state lied, lies, and continues to lie to protect its interests on both sides of the Atlantic, two snakes facing each other, but having one body. From there, bureaucratic laziness serves self-interest and preservation under state predation to hide a system that currently favors those enjoying its historical material exploitation of others, which, to use a nuclear engineering metaphor, becomes a positive void coefficient, a feedback loop feeding in secret, only to explode in apocalyptic ways in all directions. The Gorgons fart. This means, from Marx to us, a nuclear power plant just another factory to grind workers up, inside, outside. Capital is dead labor, that vampire-like only lives by sucking living labor, and lives the more labor it sucks. Source: Limits of the Working Day, 1867. He spoke of time, but the same idea applies vampirically to state violence and lies, regardless of time. I speak here to the American side of things, with Google blocking my review for hate speech years ago, back when I still used Blogger and suffered under its censorship. To that, HBO tells its own set of expertly crafted lies that, Gothic on their face, add a specific purpose. Protect big oil by dredging up and weaponizing Cold War propaganda and nostalgia through ghosts of survivors of the actual incident, often reinventing them, e.g. Valery Legasov, from that Chernobyl guy's Chernobyl for Dummies, Warning Signs, 2026. In Napoleon's words, a great propagandist over a century before nuclear power, history is a set of lies people have agreed upon. Often, I would add, multiple competing sets dueling in a non-zero-sum game's conflicting reports. Truth and lies overlap not once, but mise en abîme. It's only ever a question of what, how, and why, for whom. RE, objection equals flow as matter of function, sending power vampirically up or down, nuclear or not. Legasov, someone who actually lied to keep Chernobyl open, and who in the show crusades to expose the lies, a lie within a lie, i.e. a copy of a counter-simulacrum, and one whose patently made in the U.S. Russian doll counteracts Soviet-authored ones, leading to lies on top of lies from different authors across space and time. Lies aren't so much the problem, though, and to conclude whereupon I write regarding that Chernobyl guy's grave revelations. The Soviets were smart enough to have this cardinal rule, and dumb enough to break it. You see this kind of hubristic overreach in different Promethean cases, e.g. AI and the reality that, however romantically viewed, computers only know what you tell them. Any waxing nostalgic for a dated futurism pushing for a technological singularity, then, is overshadowed by computers containing the makeup of their masters. If not emotional, then certainly ethical and computational. I violated every rule I was given. Even if the computer is not actually human, it can still simulate this human condition, a Darwinist variant of the Turing test, I suppose. The point being, such things have an origin. Technology fails, but so can operators and/or manufacturers captured imperfectly within the creation process and its re-implementation walking arm in arm, often imperial arms, through a profit and/or productivity motive, but I digress. From Shelley to us, this foreshadowing historically manifests in state forms, either apologize and/or lie through capitalist socialist realism to conceal these shortcomings and keep power top-down. Source YouTube community post, Persephone Vanderward, 5/11/2026, in response to Chernobyl for Dummies. But in fact, they have another video echoing Korchalev's fate. Half-Lives, Vasily Ignatenko, the superhuman of Chernobyl, above 2026. Here, Go With God speaks to Ignatenko's troubled fate, that of another human summoned as imperfect ghost to serve state aims again. If we survive this until morning, we'll live forever. Being uttered by one of the first firefighters on the scene. From Marx to us, it's all about how these ghosts are summoned when used, first in tragedy and then in farce, as I did myself when re-examining Chernobyl shortly before Google nuked my OG review from orbit, re Red Scare, or out in the world. Just as Christ is a zombie that states trot out under a Protestant ethic, greedily enriching, uranium or otherwise, neoliberalism, monopoly capital, so is Legasov turned into a cartoon forgery, and Ignatenko, his own irradiated double of the Lamb of God, embezzling worker blood, actual or otherwise. Echoing Challenger and its disaster that same year in America, but during the shuttle or space side of the tech arms race, see Onto the Breach 2026, but specifically the portion on piqued interests, the untold story of the Challenger crew cabin cited in Vampires, Our Poetic Focus, from Interview with the Vampire. Behind every state lie are the bourgeoisie. Rape is rape, including the memory of rape used for sinister aims accordingly. To challenge them, workers must fight fire with fire, i.e., lies with lies, as I explain in Frederick Jameson and the Art of Lying. However, this remains a poetic and tricky business, one where I eventually euthanized Jameson for frankly being a broken clock, re, the future is a dead mole, one sharing a crowded hauntological stage, what Parenti calls inventing reality, above, being a two-way street, one worker's challenge upon ourselves and our work, e.g. Mercedes the Muse, also above, being an avid Toxic Avenger fan. Artist Mercedes the Muse cited Yesterday's Leftover Rice 2026 footnote 1. See also Toxic Slock Syndrome or Early Stab at Cryptonomy 2025. A schlocky but also critically active piece of work, Camping in America, the very toxic Soviet practice HBO's Chernobyl categorically objected away from local czars. The latter dogma in disguise, as canonical Gothic generally is, become meta-reactors, the reactions therein leading to a glowing iconoclasm, parsing through state obfuscation with darkness visible. Here is a book that will break your heart. Stare and tremble at Medusa's hellish dumper, where the truth, however gross and or glorious, is buried somewhere inside. The original review, which, by the way, this portion Google blocked for hate speech. So when you're listening to this, leave a comment letting me know where the hate speech is, because I don't know what Google was talking about. This isn't to say the show is logical. It's not. At times the contradictions were so blatant they became difficult to ignore. For example, Anatoly Dyatlov, the man responsible for the entire disaster, gets 10 years in a labor camp. Yet, by the series' own rationale, the radiation from Chernobyl is acutely lethal. Valery Legasov, the show's awkward protagonist, boldly predicts everyone to be dead in a handful of years, not just those on site, but the entire continent. Maybe he was just being dramatic. Still, it's funny how wrong the guy is. Legasov hung himself in 1888, being outlived by Dyatlov, who died in 1995. Worse for him, the total number of casualties directly attributed to the explosion and subsequent radiation poisoning tallies at a whopping 60. The long-term effects, at large, reach higher projections, of course, but these are hardly written in stone. I digress. History matters not here. What matters is how seriously the cast and crew present their threat. And boy, do they ever. When the doctors say the radioactive victims are not safe to be around, they really mean it. This fact is woefully undermined by the workers themselves never getting sick, but it still doesn't matter because everyone is so grim. When you see an unhappy plant worker falling apart in their hands, it plays out like a zombie film. This is a show that deals in absolutes of impending ceaseless doom. The victims rot, their symptoms accelerated and overblown. Graphite is radioactive enough to burn the skin off a man's hand through his protective glove without damaging the glove. Any exposure to such a volatile source would probably be enough to kill someone outright. For me, it doesn't matter though. It's the thought of immediate danger relative to an awesome power that counts. That's what the Gothic is all about. Of course, there is a real disease called acute radiation syndrome, aka radiation poisoning. However, the symptoms would not be so showy or immediate as they are in Chernobyl. Even Louis Slotin did not immediately die after being exposed to a lethal dose, 1,000 rads, absorbed radiation dose. Anything above 600 rads is almost always fatal, leading to death within months. Slotin took 9 days to die. Dyatlov took 10 years after being exposed to 390 rem, a unit of measurement comparable to rads. Neither man's body decomposed the way the victims' bodies do in Chernobyl, and even with 300 plus rem having a 50% mortality rate, Dyatlov long surpassed Legasov's moribund predictions. More curious still, the exposure of the irradiated is treated like a contagion, a disease to catch. None of the victims are allowed to be touched, become objects of fear in and of themselves. While radiation doesn't spread from victim to victim, the show embodies superstitions about radiation. These remain to this day, even if the show they are from is a scientific standpoint highly anachronistic. Tell the truth, Legasov is told, yet the truth in Chernobyl is bedridden with boogeymen, nightmares, and total ignorance. The whole ordeal feels less like reality and more like a nuclear physicist's worst nightmare. Nightmares generally take bits of reality and merge them with chaos. In this respect, Chernobyl is a real place, and some of the events actually occurred. Likewise, HBO's verisimilitude lends an element of realism to what would otherwise be a retro future straight out of Alien. The control room mirrors the walls of Mother Chamber from that movie. But the likes of Stalker 1979 were filmed in the ruins of de-Stalinized Russia. They simply had to point a camera and shoot. A similar effect occurs in Chernobyl with the help of visual effects in this case. The area around the exposed core is basically a death zone. To be honest, it reminded me of Roadside Picnic. Both stories feature invisible dangers. Those in Chernobyl are a permanence of total leeching death instead of weird alien traps. The very ground can kill you, or the air. Everything is poison, the sort you cannot taste, hear, see, or touch. Like Picnic, the danger site in Chernobyl is forbidden. However, it is also claustrophobic, along with a sense of old death and decay built up over time. The history of those who died at Chernobyl before the meltdown. The very ground is soaked red with blood. Another element to Chernobyl I enjoyed very much was the treatment of the catalyst. What made the reactor explode? You'd think this would be hard to avoid, explaining right off the bat, let alone refusing to show the blast until the very end. But this is exactly what the show does. The explosion is effectively the tremendous mystery behind all of the gloom and doom. Yet the show's makers hide as much as possible for as long as possible, despite how catastrophic the initial incident is. The destroyed core isn't revealed overhead, but through the eyes of men who must look at it from various parts of the plant. The physical limitations make sense, with some only seeing bits of graphite, which they then must try and puzzle out. How does a RBMK reactor explode? Dyatlov himself asked partway through Episode 3, how do I even know it exploded? To be fair, he hadn't seen the damaged building, and the photographs were aerial. Furthermore, there was no way to tell from the control room if the core had exploded. Someone had to come in and tell him, and even then they had to confirm it with their own eyes. All he had to do was read the redacted guides provided by the state, which left out the system's fatal flaw that made a catastrophic failure possible. So in his mind, this wasn't possible. Another jewel in the production is the treatment of the radiated land around the reactor, but I couldn't tell if this was historically accurate or not. I had to wonder if these policies were used by the state to keep people in line. The pacing is brutally slow, with entire segments devoted to an old milkmaid's cow being shot, or a greenhorn being conscripted to shoot radioactive animals, a premise straight out of Shadow of Chernobyl. There is plenty of wide, establishing shots of a derelict town. Cameras slow zoom on the blood in the grass, or the back of the greenhorn's head as he drinks from a canteen. Dirge-like music plays all throughout. The music in the show is absolutely perfect from beginning to end. It doesn't always draw attention to itself, and sometimes fades into the background, but it's always there, and stays with you afterwards. It lingers. Be they man or animal, all of the radioactive casualties are dumped into the ground, covered in concrete. The last thing I remembered wasn't the sight of the pouring stone, but the cacophony of the electronic instruments. At times they reminded me of didgeridoos or Tibetan death chants. Chernobyl stresses humanity's sacrifice in the face of catastrophe. One of my favorite scenes involved an attempt to clear a rooftop of radioactive graphite, a task for which every group of men would only have 3 minutes to complete before receiving a fatal dose, even with the protective gear on. These are the most important 90 seconds of your lives, the general explains. The tension in this scene reminds me of the Hurt Locker. The bomb disposal in that movie is bogus, so it works on suspense instead. Chernobyl uses a similar kind of fiction to create its own tension. A poor move for a documentary, but Chernobyl isn't a documentary. It's a drama, and the liberties at work are ultimately to its benefit. Another wonderful aspect to the roof scene, and most of the show, is how self-contained it is. In this damned sphere, an invisible monster hides where men should not look, but do. But you always know it's there, or feel like it is. That's the mark of good horror, and Chernobyl hits it out of the park. Some of the messages about telling the truth get lost in the muddy water, but there was less of that than I had expected going in. I certainly wouldn't treat the show as education, but it does make good for drama and exceptional horror, and the subterfuge and misdirection of the Russian state was very real. Let's not forget that. So if there are feelings of dread through ignorance, it's at least partially a display of seeing the world through Soviet eyes. Then again, I found it equally odd how some of the predictions were attitudes about radiation, and that these could have been so wrong from the good guy's perspective. You'd think they'd have known better, but their attitudes seemed equally guided by faulty science. For example, listening to Legasov lecture about bullets and uranium-235 annoyed me to no end. Not once did he mention half-lives, or the fact that radioactive materials with longer half-lives have exponentially smaller radioactive emission rates. The higher the output, the shorter the half-life by orders of magnitude, and the melting core would have never produced a thermonuclear explosion. Reactions like that don't happen by accident. It would have made another steam explosion, but why let a little hard science get in the way of a good trolley problem and big speeches about saving the world? Making Trouble, Kryptonomy-style, Anne Rice, Bloodlines, and charting of new destinies in the blood, or the rememory of older mothers, featuring Mom. I'm an intellectual. Melody Vassoff, my mother, interviewed by Linda Maloche after releasing her poetry book, In Drought Time, Scenes from Rural and Small-Town Life, 2005. Linda, who also interviewed my grandfather, a Holocaust survivor and Dutch resistance member, 2007. Monsters and Mothers predate Mary Shelley, are as old as Medusa, i.e. as de facto teachers for when the men aren't around or chaotically let us down, above, cited Army of Darkness valorizing the idiot hero, 2020. So a quick refresher on Kryptonomy and Bloodlines vis-a-vis the echoes of this or that during the rememory process, a ghostly assemblage of the past, RE from Toni Morrison, I that give rise to young blood made from old parts, RE dissecting Radcliffe, 2025. From Milton's Satan to Shelley's Creature, rebels chart new destinies while swimming in oceans of spilled blood. Tupola Bathory versus a Moses, a Red Army parting the Red Sea to free Palestine from the river to the sea, alongside all oppressed peoples, and a shared pedagogy healing from rape. Like Omelus, the point in walking away from Egypt, if that means not genociding other people, not towards it. Israel is a ploy to buy cheap loyalty and furtherance to capital's continued raping of others, Jews included. This will certainly ruffle some feathers, but I'm a satanic atheist, i.e., there is no God, only workers versus the elite, and whatever deities either fabricates for their own purposes. My doing so happens while speaking to those harmed by refusing to look past matters of a purely ethnic character. It was never about pure ethnicity, so-called ethnic Jews echoing ethnic Germans, but dividing and conquering more broadly, using that and other means of persecution through various networks thereof. Jews don't have a monopoly on Holocaust, and as Zionism shows us, they can tokenize like any other minority group to police nature with, i.e. non-white skin, white masks, e.g. the Incas, imperial subjugates, and the conquistadors. Betrayal is betrayal. It's only ever a question of who and why. Source from my anti-Zionist, anti-racist work on anti-Semitism versus anti-Semitism with or without a hyphen, 2024. Image, Ibid. In turn, the Western world is generally a place that testifies to its own traumas, which we've already read. Source, healing from rape. To that, ghosts, in a linguo-material sense, are records of people that survived them, often versions of said people that no longer exist, if they ever did. This includes my mother, who, while very much still alive and kicking today, remains a survivor of things that paradoxically survive her current self, as fragmented ghosts of a collective past, i.e. the rememory process, one concerning an assemblage to concentrically assemble and reflect cryptomimetically on whilst between these different puzzle pieces, a caramel onion skull inside the pumpkin. So, in cryptonymic terms, that show and hide restless things at the same time, I wish to ungag Medusa on the Black Mirror, to set her free and have the whore's revenge, regardless of gender, as intersectionally conscious and solidarized in tactical frivolity. Mazes or monsters in mazes, the dark home synonymous with the secret home owner, the whore, now kept prisoner at its dreadful core, closed space leeching from the unhappy host. Whores witness things to testify to, about capital, later, often post-mortem, above. In turn, we heal from rape, by playing with rape, in quotes, which vampires, per the dialectic of the alien, neatly encapsulate, and while we keep returning to them, echoes of ourselves, released and resonating recursively in oft-parental, long-lost siblings buried alive, aye, working ways out through the rivalries of a friendly to not-so-friendly sort, above and below. It isn't tunnel vision, but forbidden sight opening, as Blake would put it, the doors of perception. Also, my mother's a huge Jim Morrison fan. But I digress. So did I emulate my mother, but also in the same token, women like Mary Shelley, all the way back to Medusa, whom my mother, or parts of them, emulated before me. As rebellious, uncanny, and sexual to asexual symbols of power that remain nonetheless keenly psychosexual and psychomachic, etc. on the social side of socialist development. Nature is classically female, monstrous feminine, and game recognizes game, i.e. is passed down, one whore in the whorehouse, the secret dark princess in a black castle, to the next, dialectically materially. Trauma is difficult to avoid, often billowing outward and collocatively through sudden outrageous violence. The cartoon haunted by the real deal, parody pastiche, but still drinking the proverbial Kool-Aid, or chocolate milk, below. If you prick me, do I not spew? Cited yesterday's leftover rice. Furthermore, there is always another castle to reify and raise, mis en abîme, and often through that neo-medieval revival and rivalry, the modern Gothic celebrates reviving ghosts, re scouting the field in Geiger Xenomorph 2023 and 2025. Newer vampires come from older vampires, the flexible bloodlines in and out of fiction, speaking to us and ours, dwelling and dueling, on stage and off. We're all made of the same meat, or ectoplasm, as something to enrich or reduce, tenderize accordingly. For example, my mom, in hearing me gush about the vampires of New Orleans, immediately asked, "Does it have anything to do with Anne Rice's novels?" So I figured I may as well add the film synopsis here. In an announcement video, writer-director Andrew Rakich explained how the idea for the film originated in a short story he wrote about a character closely based on Louis de Locke from Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles. In the books, Louis is an 18th century Louisiana plantation owner who becomes a vampire and refuses to take human life. In Rakich's short story, a similar vampire character has the same moral qualms but does not consider people of color to be human, and therefore fair game for bloodsucking. The film expands this concept to include other vampires, which Rakich described as historical figures in arrested development, such as the serial killer the Axeman, who preys on the vulnerable in modern New Orleans, Rakich's Omelis, as well as a black Van Helsing who emerges to fight them. Source, fandom. In keeping with that, and in pulling on the thread of destiny as something to seize the day, a means of production, meta-objection in gothically mature ways, consider here a taste of the cartonomy side of that equation, which I explore alongside objection all the time. RE state vampirism, but also seeing dead people, 2024. Secret horrors trapped between virgin horror binaries, the proletariat vampires, unpaid or otherwise, and queerly favoring the environment with anti-racist dialogues, cryptomimetically camp. Doing so here happens under a holistic, intersectional exhibit of rememory, one concerning the open secret troublemaker who, mother to me and Gothic communism as a numinous echo of the Gorgon, inspired my shenanigans and attaches, i.e. Anne Rice and her vampire novels, racial and queer allegories being tremendously productive then and now. Mom, the strongest person I know, but also the most complicated, as ghosts generally are, vampires a kind of ghost. My apple didn't fall far from the tree. I digress. Dad wasn't around. So who else was I supposed to learn from? Mom taught me what strength was, especially Amazons, including the ones above. I modeled after Robert E. Howard's Red Sonja, i.e. as revived by Marvel in the golden age of Amazons post-Marston, below. My own quest for a numinous kami-mami isn't so odd. Capital makes us feel tired relative to the self as alien, both incumbent on the very things they rape to nurture them, re Irigaray's creation of sexual difference. I'm hardly the first person to notice this. As Edward Said astutely notes, in culture and imperialism, most societies project their fears on the unknown, or the exotic other. This barren land, where the viewers are kept disorientated, is threatening. It is a place between the familiar and the foreign, like part of a dream or vision that one cannot remember clearly. There is always a sense of a lurking danger from which the viewers need protection. Nikita provides that sense of protection. Source Laura Ng's The Most Powerful Weapon You Have, Warriors in Gender and La Femme Nikita, 2003. I am, however, a trans woman who has gone above and beyond women like Barbara Creed, Angela Carter, Luce Irigaray, and Laura Ng, etc. in my pioneering of Little Gothic BDSM, as a holistic kami-mami means of synthesizing proletarian praxis inside the operatic danger disco in disguise, the rape castle riffing on Walpole, Lewis, Radcliffe, Konami, Nintendo, and so many others. RE in search of the secret spell. Artist Ed Benz. Where do you think I got that from? The void? I got it from Mom, who taught me gingers do have souls and kick ass like Red Sonja above. So many with privilege, often white straight men, speak of oppression in abstract terms, while never having faced it directly themselves, and are taught to be dumbly penetrative, as are women, other tokens who emulate serve patriarchal capitalism in deeply tragic ways. ACAB, re valorizing the idiot hero. Having been under someone else's power, who celebrated capital, defending it and neoliberalism from communism, re Jadis, seagoing mask off, 2025, I chased what I wanted to become, as taught to me through my mother's stories and media she shared with me, what mirrored, to a degree, her life in idealized form. Those historically underestimated by patriarchy's bourgeois element. All of that weird humor and love for D&D-style badass bitches I got from Mom and her ghostly homebrew. Exhibit 103, Liminal Monster Porn in the Internet Age, 2025. Artist left, right, Persephone Vanderward. My fan art of the Amazon and vampire boss from Dragon's Crown, 2013, a college favorite, and a drawing of me of Tyrus Flair from Golden Axe, 1989, a childhood favorite. So a given flame-haired thing, a firecracker, appears desirable, albeit in highly tempting veneers that resist easy translation. The Amazon and her angel devil battles with Gorgon-like things, nakedly powerful but also fearsome, off-limits, etc. From I am woman, hear me roar, to get your hand off my penis. Eat that meal but also become it, a given dish, forbidden fruit, succulent and Chinese, or otherwise, to proof and poison, thus delight and devour in equal confounding measure, for measure. Source, Amazons, 2025. Weird attracts weird. To learn from the past, we must interrogate its wisdom of the ancients and ancestors, re the value in showing intersectional solidarity when combating fascism. Doing so means in the flesh as memento mori, reborn in endless interviews with vampires who birth us and us others on and on. Time is a circle, one haunted by horrors who refuse to stay silent, my mother being homeless once upon a time, and teaching me the value in sex work as something to support that prevents homelessness in the future, i.e. as the world's oldest profession, service and struggle tied to monstrous feminine poetics, but also the land, re with her own book. In drought time, and when I recalled while remembering her wisdom, nature is alien, see again the riddle of steel. She lived life to the fullest, mad for much of it while hell-bent on making sure I was safe, able to learn from her stories whatever I needed to survive. A ghost is a ghost, vampire or not. To that, here's the wisdom Mom shared with me, most of this common knowledge in the family as open secrets by the time I was old enough to vote. Exhibit 9, source left, Chelsea Library, 2011, originally 2005. Right, it began with a whisper, originally the early 90s. Vampires are, amongst other things, alter egos, with women in Gothic fiction classically delineating through their desire of different lover archetypes and mutilative desire, R.E. Cynthia Wolfe, 1979, see Radcliffe's Refrain. However, there also are blood ties, meaning where we come from, and to some extent where we're going, a recursive mystery to solve while on the tracks. In my case, I'm the spitting image of my mother as virgin whore. Such dead ringers are uncanny insofar as we reassemble, however partially, a secret side of someone tied to somewhere, a ghost of the Gorgon who preceded us, bound by and to the same ancestral homes, traveling burial site, a space of rest that cannot sleep, a rift or emerging dispute, but also potential resolution when the chickens come home to roost, the past given flesh in so many ways hyphenating house and home, as fatal homecoming, the classic plight of any Gothic heroine facing herself as prodigal whore. Think Jane Eyre, and the Bildungsroman, except our debutante never left the Red Room. The wedding of one true trauma is forever in hell, meaning highly dualistic in ways that align safety, danger, and pleasure-pain that cannot unscramble. The Bride of Dracula, a famous monstrous feminine, being regardless. The Bride of Dracula, a monstrous feminine being, regardless how saintly she seems, Persephone wedded to Hades. Forget reader, I married him. For women, historically property for the state, their hell is often just beginning when the storybook ending shuts for everyone else. R.E. defined through sex normativity, and popular media, 2025. Sex work, sold role-wise to those who, given a choice, would never have sex or kids ever again, though still loving the ones they already have, of course. From Austin to us, a woman's upward social mobility canonically equals prostitution whitewashed in churchly lace, one with a heavy price for the ghostly bride, e.g. not just Fanny Price in Mansfield Park, 1815, but Anna Karenina, 1875. These portraits capture moments in time that don't always yield obvious answers, but white-splashed in red in fourth-dimensional ways remain uncanny nonetheless, thus vampirically magnetic. In 2005, for instance, my mother was living with an abusive second husband, not my dad, above, who actually harmed her far worse than when she was homeless, and when she escaped initially in the mid-80s through marriage, her stalker chasing her home, meaning from where she had gone to escape home to begin with. Yet you might hear her state at the time, I'm an intellectual, and think her privileged. Fair enough. From Athens to America, it's possible to have privilege and still be second class in state eyes. Women, the ancient virgin whore, scapegoat to blame by patriarchal forces who themselves never really left home. Home is dead, so women perch, historically, on the forefront of that frightening discovery, trapped in, along with it, like amber or glass, as something fragile that, when viewed, might break you to pieces. They give up the witch's secret / ghost. Destruction is something to come and see in Gothic. Cryptomimesis writes with ghosts to get at things between pieces of dead language that, from Marx to us, gets at things Western Marxism often overlooks. The power of Gothic predating Marx, but also outlasting Freud, Creed, Derrida, and others to champion unpaid labor. Fatal portraits and librarial that, paradoxically having no mouth but needing to scream, beckon to onlookers stare and tremble, i.e. in all the usual ways state defenders ignore. Full of riddles, Gothic is riddled with nameless female ghosts, e.g. Lewis's Bleeding Nun, or mysterious beauties treated like currency by state powers, re. prostitution. Artist Gustav Klimt, one of my mother's favorite pieces by him, and one she kept on a wall in our childhood home. Regarding Western Marxism, e.g. George Rockhill's Who Paid the Pipers of Western Marxism, 2025, extending to my own Gothic gay anarcho-communist criticisms of Marx and Engels, Stalin and Mao, but also Freudian psychoanalysis, Chomsky's unapologetic stupidity with Cambodia, and Sino-Soviet Marxist Leninism, re. preface and The Price of Rice, but also state vampirism. Artist laughed. Tim Jacobus cited Death by Snoo Snoo 2024, Middle and Right, models Regina K. Walters, and Melody at the time, Vanderward. Gothic equals decay of memory and trauma is something to live with within, and try mid-rememory to preserve what slips between our fingers while topping from below, e.g. fatal portraits, photographs, these of my mother's wedding I found when moving from where I am to where we're going, and haunted by specters of other dead women above. I'm adding them here to testify to someone who never knew innocence, but through all the double standards and virgin whore contradictions state power requires, stayed for many years trapped in the nuclear model to eventually escape it, a survivor with complex trauma and PTSD seemingly unclouded by conscience, remorse, and delusions of morality, the destroyer, but all the same incredibly loving and kind. She was back then the sport of sorrow and its deliverer from abject misery. For others she birthed, i.e. my mother was for me my first exposure to a witch, secretly of the devil's company, whispering forbidden knowledge, one I walked in the footsteps of when trying to escape the same curse. To reach the Red Bull, you have to walk through time. And as I chased the ghost of my still-breathing mother and the Gorgon to secret hauntologies she herself relayed to me, and me to you, that I survived before writing my books, re from Angry Mothers. Modeled from left to right, safe for work versions, Miss Reefer, Blood Bunny, and Milking Marlowe. How could I have any regrets when working with such angels, while having survived the complete and utter torture that preceded them? Jadis was my great destroyer. They took with impunity. They scattered my wits, drained my sanity, and stole my will to live. Source, Persephone Vanderwards, setting the record straight. My ex's abuse of me, February 17th, 2022. By comparison, these cuties, stellar and glowing, utterly restored it, gave me something to live for, something warm and serene, but joyous, thunder-striking, and awesome, helping my friends avoid similar fates, i.e. an angelic and devilish bliss comparable to what Matthew Lewis described following the riot and fall of Ambrosio in The Monk, 1794. The remaining years of Raymond and Agnes, of Lorenzo and Virginia, were happy as can be those allotted to mortals, born to be the prey of grief and sport of disappointment. The exquisite sorrows with which they had been afflicted made them think lightly of every succeeding woe. They had felt the sharpest darts in misfortune's quiver. Those which remained appeared blunt in comparison. Having weathered fate's heaviest storms, they looked calmly upon its terrors, or if ever they felt affliction's casual gales, they seemed to them gentle as zephyrs which breathe over summer seas. To that I'll let you in on a little secret. The greatest irony of Jadis harming me is they accidentally gifted me with the appreciation of calculated risk, scoured with invisible knives. I don't view my scars as a weakness at all. I relish the feeling of proximity to the ghost of total power, of knowing that motherfucker took me to the edge, but didn't take everything from me. I escaped them and lived to do my greatest work in spite of their treachery. Like the halls of a cathedral, I lived torments and joys color this castled work, ornamenting its various passages with the power of a full life. I've known such terror that makes the various joys I experience now all the more sweet and delicious. I am visited by ghosts of my rapturous design, the empress of my fate, the queen of a universe shared with seraphs the likes of which I can hardly describe. No coward soul is mine. Am I privileged enough, white, male, American middle class, to not be immediately killed by those with the stomach for it, trapped on the wrong side of the imperial fence or the law? Yes, but let it be known all the same that all our abusers, however powerful they might seem, can't completely own us, nor take the best things during the divorce. They don't monopolize what works, when combined adventurously by us, which we may do as we want, to have fun and learn with those we have eyes for. My creative stealing of their power, through my own work, aligning sex more like metaphors to liberate the monstrous feminine by illustrating mutual consent with sincere revolutionaries. To it, there are no perfect victims or abusers, but she, my mother, and her Galatian specters, of Medusa as much as Marx, being some of the oldest exploited by the state's nuclear model out of antiquity into present space and time. They speak, however liminal, to a scarlet imprimatur, to the vampire's ageless awesome power of discovery as cryptonymic ways to voice our predicaments across generations routinely stolen from, the courage of the seemingly meek and small, and devils in disguise showing you what real courage and arrested development looks like. That's not simply an appearance, then, of vastly unequal and unfair conditions, i.e. of power arranged in dialectical material ways seen by future workers to all the usual dualities Gothic BDSM was tailored to address, away from sharing the blame. You take the smooth with the rough, returning to trauma to camp it knowing your abusers and criminogenic conditions are undoubtedly present as well. It's a black veil, one to pull aside and remind you your abusers are gone, but how it feels to have their stamp of trauma linger on, within and all around you, candy from a baby. Show us on the doll where the bad man touched you. Speaking as a rape survivor, former victim of child abuse, such dolls are necessary. Furthermore, the neo-Gothic ability to recreate such scenes, and their awesome confusion above, can serve us in profoundly educational, anti-predatory ways, i.e. not reinforcing stigma and stereotype, but playing with them concerning the survivor's acclimation to trauma as something to forever live with, return to, and Gothic maturity, lacking in canonical forms, and often caught in the middle, e.g. Dragon 1993, below. Source, Trial by Fire. Demon Muscle Mommies, 2024. Conjuring up numinous things to comment on systemic inequality under capital, i.e. home equals alien, and Gothic, one whose nuclear model remains haunted by older abuse, and whose victims have tremendous power in terms of their axe to grind, to a seasonal degree felt year-round. The grim harvest of the Halloween horror come home to roost. Nature is monstrous feminine. The merchandise during the horror's revenge becomes a weaponized sphere. By reversing terror counter-terror through a hostile planet in small, the alien beings of nature under Cartesian dualism can reverse abjection, i.e. induality, by anisotropically reclaiming the aegis upon themselves, humanize the harvest, expose the state as inhumane. Source, Paid Labor. This happens by recognizing how we're alien, then embracing such things to reach others with, i.e. on either side of privilege, oppression, finding common ground during Little Gothic BDSM, i.e. healing from rape. Paradoxically, this requires some degree of fascination with things we see as alien, including our bodies and those of our potential friends, i.e. of the fertile kind, loaded for bear to change minds with different strokes for different folks. In that respect, e.g. Rose's hefty knockers, below. Artist, Romantic Rose. In conjuring the bastard or the whore and their sizable assets above, such things are notably regressive doorways that repeat in tragedy and then in farce, useful to workers punching up from hell, below. Cited Angry Mothers. Like mother, like daughter. We imperfect survivors have it rough, yes, but make it to have the whore's revenge, in mythical ways that survive against all odds. E.g., Medusa was raped in her sleep, then castrated to birth a demonic rape baby post-mortem, i.e. Medusa misunderstood. The Pegasus. Alongside that, Medusa's head remained cathonically sovereign, eventually destroying the men exploiting her power for themselves. In my mother's case, she endured terrible things, a series thereof that cannot be described in polite company, and which she struggles sometimes to remember, to birth a little fighter, me, who also faced and survived her own great trauma. Tied to a larger cycle of generational trauma and theft, Mom always, at least publicly, struggled to voice her own abuse, and being a rape survivor, myself, clawed from 2 eggs, C-section, and baby queer, Mom gave her waywardly gay daughter a home after COVID, one I used to write my book series speaking out for both of us, a room of one's own, as Virginia Woolf once put it. Cut from the same hellish cloth, we shared the same expectations society forced on us, albeit diametrically inverted, in my case, because of my sex, but me being a woman thus policed all the same, i.e. through trans emasculation, as a kind of vampire not unlike the Scarlet Woman, is both homewrecker witch and Lady of the Night, going her own way to upend state models of psychosexual domination and control. For the state, whore equals anything that fights back, which it unironically tars using the same basic brush, with cis women and trans men classically feminized by heteronormative powers, anything masculine, monstrous feminine, castrated or cut off like Medusa's proverbial head, e.g. staked, shot, shorn, or burned at the stake, etc., as trans women, framed as violent, perfidious home invaders, classically are, RE Exhibit 1A, 1A, 2B, from Symposium Aftercare, 2023, see also Policing the Whore. Artist, left, Ben Wiki, middle, Joe Morse. Right, artist, Pagong 1, cited, middle, and right, in Assembling Trauma and Questions of Betrayal, and Crash Course Introduction to Vampires and Witches. And yet Medusa cannot die, surviving in ghostly ways that rise repeatedly from the grave to ransack Rome. Everyone loves the horror, nothing more police than sex, due force by state powers pimping nature. Holistic revolutionaries free Medusa, liberating the sovereign and all of nature from state bondage, meaning under settler colonialism, heteronormativity, and Cartesian dualism, thus capitalist and socialist realism is threatened by communist life after death of state powers, i.e., as Gothic gay anarcho-communism does, camping the canon alongside bad actors, we can never wholly escape. To play with scapegoats, thus subvert the usual pimp-like violence they eventually afford, on stage and off. Again, abjection cuts both ways, the good actor using the same predator-prey devices bad ones do to deliver a hidden wound, one our enemies don't always feel at first, any more than babies do their umbilical cord being cut, but certainly will the next morning, eating their bloodline alive, above, like Titus Andronicus, while waiting upon nature's mischief. So is revenge, phallic or otherwise, a notably bloody business, if only to articulate the flow that blood, actual or not, normally travels, the polarity reversing while coursing in our veins, on our teeth, and from ours to others, to others, to others. Source, a vampire history primer, or a latter-day conceptualization of vampirism from the 1970s onwards, 2024. Seductive and elusive, vampires equal ghosts that feed and speak to trauma in different tropish ways, e.g. the abuser and victim and avenger, all being survivors in some shape or form, often at odds, an extension of the author above. Objection equals flow, and flow goes both ways. The vampire, a metaphor for capital and small, but also state decay as dualistically fascist and communist to deeply liminal extremes. Things don't separate in Gothic, they allied, inviting an endlessly operatic and troubling comparison mid-dialectic, one raising socio-material concerns, danger discos in the flesh, but translate, triangulate, visually, in highly performative ways, above and below. One can focus on class, culture, and or race, to varying playful degrees, the world is a vampire, or a war store. Often, too, there's a wavering degree of troubling intuition, naked power, and dark premonition, and metamorphosis, and often we do it while under the vampire's magic spell, drawn myopically to trauma and predation, in deeply hypnotic, wraith-like ways we can't help but play with ourselves, i.e. like others before us did, often weird nerds, who feel the call while having tasted its terrors already. So the call isn't just of the void while inside the house, but of an uncanny ability to feed how we desire, all while commenting on foreboding things. In semi-taboo language, mid-chronotope, the traveling castle, chock full of wandering ghosts, hemorrhaging data. Gothic is nothing if not flexible, die-hard. The Gothic the enemy, the state cannot kill, because it needs to move money through nature, selling scapegoats as drugs, sex, and rock and roll, e.g. Castlevania and its many resurrections. Under Gothic gay anarcho-communism, nothing is sacred except for basic human, animal, and environmental rights, assimilation, poor stewardship, see the power of dreams, from yesterday's leftover rice, a lovely pun, for more maxims and slogans. Artists Allegra Viper and August Harper cited leaving the closet. So we vampires, horrors, and their lady tramp pomper prince specters above, speaking ways that slay our foes, the status quo, through various stormings of the castle, and similar psychosexual puns, meaning as a cunning, if cunty way, to prevent harm, during and after Little Gothic BDSM, RE through darkness visible, splendid lies, what have you. Here are beauties which pierce like swords, or burn like cold iron. Here is a book that will break your heart. Doing so cryptonymically grants us heartbreakers, i.e. not piously prude weirdos like C.S. Lewis, a bit of a broken clock, e.g. the problem of pain, the numinous ability to hide and strike, feeding and hunting from the shadows as taught to us. The numinous ability to hide and strike, feeding and hunting from the shadows as taught to us. Suppose you were told there was a tiger in the next room, you would know that you were in danger and would probably feel fear. But if you were told there was a ghost in the next room and believed it, you would indeed feel what is often called fear, but of a different kind. It would not be based on the knowledge of danger, for no one is primarily afraid of what a ghost may do to him, but of the mere fact that it is a ghost. It is uncanny rather than dangerous, and the special kind of fear it excites may be called dread. With the uncanny, one has reached the fringes of the numinous. Source, The Problem of Pain, 1940. Artist, Sarah Kate Foster's A Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad, 2017. Source, Michael Uhall's A Spectre, A Speaker, Whistle and I'll Come to You, 1968, cited Origins and Lineage, 2023. Instead, where the tiger burning bright in the forest of the night, did he who make the lamb make thee? Again, I call it the commonest palliative numinous, i.e. the perfect dom between person and place to quest for while camping the canon during Little Gothic BDSM, doing so in ways that showcase myriad interpretations while favoring ones that don't occlude the state, i.e. avatars of the Gorgon, a ghost of the counterfeit who appear mighty in ordinary veneers that, to varying degrees, cryptonymically belie their abject, tremendously mysterious and uncanny cargo, re. the quest for power, from Camping the Canon. Power is something to perform, not monopolize, re. notes on power. This includes Rice being deceptively ordinary, at least on the surface. Like ninjas, pirates, gorillas, etc., is all reversing capitalist realism, cryptonomy, and abjection by humanizing nature is alien, or, in deeply theatrical ways, re. Radcliffe's black veil, often splashed in red to denote healthy if cannibalistic appetites, also above. When in Rome, we burn Caesar to the ground while haunting its venues, me lurking in Mom's VHS tape of 1994 interview until I wore it out. By deliberately calculating risk during Ludo-Gothic BDSM, we camp the language of moral panic, i.e. a campier vampirism injected with irony is something that doesn't instantly betray itself. Instead, it oscillates, a dance with death, the dead, and Mask of the Red Death, etc., with black and red being the colors not just of fascism and communism or witches and whores, but power and death tied to vitality and corruption, radical change evoking Ptolemy's humors and so-called fatal visions, re. Macbeth, to expand the mind and other things in pre-capitalist ways. A copy of Between the Tsar and People, Educated Society and the Quest for Public Identity in Late Imperial Russia, a Russian to English to Russian dictionary, over 32,000 references, and Behind the Rules by John Scott, enlarged edition prepared by Stephen Kotkin. All of those belong to my mom, as well as the original Polaroid of them with the Red Army in 1992. Vampires love heirlooms, tied to their lengthy and complicated pasts, each of my mom's old college textbooks and Polaroids above. We live in a world where the magical have been replaced by awesome technologies that make everything easy to an inshitifying degree, and while not everyone has access to such things, some do alongside the past as something to uncover among the debris and left behinds. In turn, choosing to play with dead things is frightening and fun. Rememory's reminders of a before time felt vividly and obscurely among a variety of other warring sensations that, far from allied and explode, divide into an army of dance partners tied to us and ours. E.g., me watching and reading Anne Rice for its hot lesbian-coded men when Mom didn't know, and Hamlet chasing his father's ghost. Gothic castle equals nightmare anti-home that beyond Victorian policings of young maidens' desires, so-called pearl-clutching to hammer the point home, to ask ourselves with the usual numinously nightly subversions brought to light of day, re. darkness visible, yes, but also hot blood speaking to a rainbow of fluids, see Castles in the Flesh. So I've dug up my mom's bones, celebrating her tragic courage, like Lewis's bleeding nun, of a former life, bottling bloody tears and dancing with footloose skeletons, or fakeries of them, ghosts of the counterfeit. We don't blame them, but do recognize the agency they had while state powers infantilized them under criminogenic conditions. Humor becomes a form of stealthy critique, but also enjoyment dodging the censors and critics' condemnation, to bend like a reed in the wind, not a femur or those holding it, snapping under stress below. Cited My Experiences, 2024. In other words, learning is naughty through open secret lessons lying around the house, neighborhood, i.e. imparting through campy code, concealing a truer purpose that gives way during the interview as rememory. So the whore's revenge is a derelict one, to find and turn someone consciously undead, demonic, animalistic, etc., as capital gentrifies and decays to afford workers strange appetites, re. a cruel angel's thesis. So we whores rebel in a variety of voyeur exhibit ways that vampires and comparable virgin whore beings to assemble below hyphenate excel at mid-rememory, re. introducing revolutionary cryptonomy and transgressive nudism, those close to life and death, in big little forms, size difference, conveying secret treaties during Little Gothic BDSM. I learned it from Mom, and she from the street, or Medusa the big whore, awaits. Whores rock and roll. They also rule from the shadows. Artist Allegra Viper and August Harper cited Ibid. Murder will out, babes. Slay. Secret sluts become the great destroyer. States fear in ways they cannot pimp to serve themselves. With as much stealth or open threats you desire, required to break the usual monopolies on yourselves in gothically mature ways. An angel in the streets, freak in the sheets, or vice versa. People are here for a show, after all, to see venom and fireworks fighting poison with poison, fire with fire, etc. Trash below, evoking Federici's commentary on witch hunts as tokenizing alienation devices quoted by Hot Allostatic Load, 2015, cited Policing the Whore, 2024. Artist Mercedes the Muse cited Toxic Schlock Syndrome, or an early stab at cryptonomy, the furrative rebellion of Amazons, body hair, whistleblowers, and duality. Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead. And if one of us jumps or doesn't jump the shark the way you prefer, find another piper to play Pied or Pan's dreadful tune to blow the whistle, also below. Grant me revenge, and if you do not listen, then to hell with you. I digress. The difference between Rice and Rakich, while keeping her and Mom's unconsciously rebellious characteristics and other mothers to monstrous rebellion in mind above, the latter, at least on the surface, again, I haven't seen Orleans yet, plays with the same theatrical devices, i.e. to allow for greater intersection and insurrection, sedition in disguise, a postmodern, post-colonial, and post-mortem tradition drawing from Jean Rice's Weiser OC, 1966, Beloved, 1989, and similar rememory style catalogs, specifically Rice's making Bertha Antoinette Causeway from Jane Eyre, 1847, the central protagonist, compared by Bronte to a vampire or a goblin, in which Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar, in 1979, called The Madwoman in the Attic. So does Rakich, race swap their protagonist, i.e. doing so to shift focus onto race, a racial allegory arguably present the entire time. The 2018 adaptation of Anne Rice's story, Making Louis Black, below. Such things are fine provided it's to raise awareness, not cash in on cunning recognitions, bad faith representation, i.e. of racial minorities, alongside other oppressed groups, feeling the heat in different ways, those preyed on by state corporate machinery and actors, e.g. so-called Black Snape, in the billionaire-backed HBO double-dipping of the Harry Potter franchise, Dead on Arrival. The devil's in the details, the data in the blood, however corrupt it appears, the object cryptonymic, but also cryptomimetic presence of conflicting reports, fascism famously from Lenin, Capital and Decay, but also socialism and Marx's infamous specters, i.e. pushing imperfectly towards communism, to take, at the same time, several steps back, he loved vampire metaphors, but remains a giant homophobe, debatable anti-Semitic person. C'est la vie. Rebellion, for all the poo-pooing Marxist-Leninists of a reactionary sort whine about, is performative, and often in ways that include warped gender performance, e.g. cross-dress, drag shows, and trans folk punching up, Drag Me to Hell, me, BCB's Butler, and Green et al.'s famous works. See Inside the Man Box, 2025. Development is both social and material, Marx's base and superstructure something to camp in duality, on Twin Trees, 2023. Immortality is, from Matheson to us, and Mom, Anne Rice, Mary Shelley, and Medusa, etc., a drinking of the blood, or eating of green eggs and ham, to live forever. So rememory isn't an act of forgetting exclusively, but raising awareness in the blood, as among those of the flesh and blood. This roots in consciousness as intersectional, through holistic study, reversing objection in different anisotropic, apotropaic ways, but also by allowing different forms of excluded labor into the fold. Racial minorities, yes, but also, as I argue, sex workers, which homeless people often are, meaning survival sex work. This categorically stresses unpaid labor as also including care work, aka reproductive labor, but me taking it one step further than many older feminists, to lionize the chief scapegoat of capital / the state, which the whore very much is, the home wrecker. Whores are clowns, then, but also class warriors swimming in vitality as blood in so many words. A S-war is class war with modular elements of race and culture selectively thrown in per case. It's a cloak, but of vampires, with black and red striking at reality and realism as two different things, and allowing for shared struggle and disagreements concerning virtues and vices around sex work under socialist realism below. It goes for workers of any gender or sex, but also religion and other qualities. And before anyone asks, my mother only thinks sex work is harmful when people are forced into it by pimps. Tip your sex workers, it's a service after all, she'd always tell me, alongside don't hit girls and other adages. Heart of gold or otherwise, never blame the whore, blame the state and criminogenic factors, pimping them in bad faith. Adages, alongside girls don't poop, but I digress, girls shit. And that's a fact. Source, thumbnail, featuring Lady Izdihar Wright, Intersecting Discourse inviting two different Muslims to discuss trans-indigenous rights, 2026. See also Critiquing Soviet Aesthetics During Socialist Realism from Raising Awareness. Such is cryptonomy as a complicit or revolutionary device, defeating or upholding state predation from one mother's rememory to the next, chasing the communist numinist and its dark archaic mother either way, are the quest for power. But what of whores themselves, outside my family circle? Well, you see, they've been here the whole time. This means, in a Foucauldian sense, paradoxically relegated to the prison-like, panopticon-style bedroom, they are trying to escape, but also reclaim, discipline, and punish. R.E. Gothic BDSM, reversing objection, specifically by placing rape in quotes. So fight fire with fire, babes. R.E. Sex marks the spot, and Marx needs cheerleaders to make him gay, real bad. Save him from himself, and ourselves from the state. Whatever monsters state vampirism and capitalist socialist realism summon to fuck us, make your own, fort, fatale or otherwise, and fuck back. Hard. Wendy Croy that shit, minus the transphobia. Footnote number 15. Especially Amazons, including the ones I modeled after Robert E. Howard's Red Sonja. With mom-loving pulp media like Amazons for sharing a troubled past, the latter conquered by imaginary Athens, and mom by those who came after. One she passed on, not out of fear, but admiration and love, rooted between imagination and real life. To prevent future harm, R.E. the Riddle of Steel are confronting past wrongs. 2024. In Gothic, this get 'em while they're young approach typically uses frankly trashy stories to lead people towards allegories deeper inside on the surface, i.e. Red Sonja, 1985, is an objectively terrible movie, but we still rented a copy from the local chart hits every weekend. I like the idea, if not the execution, but even there we still wind up with seriousness that fails, what Susan Sontag in 1964 called True Camp, r.e. my least favorite horror movies, 2020. Source, Persephone Silk Song Symposium, 2025. And later, Fascinating Fascism, 1974. Manure is manure, but one having a fertilizing effect, erotic or otherwise, if fetishized correctly. I took Amazons and ran with them, but it all started with Mom, i.e. she thought they were cool, ergo so did I, and now we remember them, hence, as ghosts of ghosts of ghosts. Footnote 16. Sex work sold role-wise to those who, given a choice, would never have kids or sex ever again, though still loving the ones they already have, of course. Gothic often saying ace parties, which care sex workers commonly are, accident of birth, treating sex as public nudism to interrogate trauma, e.g. Blood Bunny and the finale, 2023, helping me formulate Little Gothic BDSM. You gaze into the abyss. Sometimes the abyss gazes back. Boobies. For the ace side of Gothic art and sex work, refer to Crash Course, an introduction to asexuality and demisexuality. Footnote 17. From Austin to Us, a woman's upward social mobility canonically equals prostitution whitewashed in churchly lace. Footnote 17. As much a status class symbol as one of virginal purity, dating back to Queen Victoria for the former, and also a ghostly marker of the kept woman after leaving the sexual marketplace, a forever young, old, the maiden and or the crone, aka child hag horror, preserved uncannily in her wedding dress or nightgown, reduced to an unwilling sex object, one that testifies to nuclear horrors out of joint, through a liminal, terrifying appearance in and out of shared space. In Gothic, ghosts of women east and west speak to female violence not survived save as ghosts, aka fragments. A ghost in its appearance in a home commonly signified two basic types, victim and avenger, invading the new homeowner's still occupied house, or the demon and the damsel, and other black, white binaries, e.g. good, evil, victim, terror, counter-terror, and order, disorder, papered over, exercised by capital on previously and recursively stolen land. Damsels are screwed because they're not supposed to be abused, making their testimony anathema. Demons, by comparison, offer forbidden knowledge to give trade for, in radicalizing ways, like burial, are demons from composites and the occult to totems in the natural world, 2024. Either case equals ratting on the state, which furthers objection for Faustian or Promethean exchange, generally by punching down at a given restless labyrinth and its spectral inhabitants, are policing the horror. From Beauvoir's woman is other, to us, and nature is monstrous feminine. As awesome mystery to solve, the devil is in the details, a method to the madness, both allusions to Hamlet surviving mimetically into the present. Artist Henry Fuseli, Seeing Dead People, or Undead Feeding Vectors Part 2, Ghosts and the Numinous. Yet ghosts, being uncanny as the Gorgon is, cannot die, making their mere existence an ontological refusal to be erased. It's often involuntary, both cryptomimetic and historical material. The traditions of all past generations of dead horrors weigh like a nightmare on the brains of the living. Source, the 18th Brumaire, 1852. Never shake your gory locks or snakes for hair at me. Her dead tits were there. Rattle that bottle. Rather than bottle those genies up, we let Pandora out of her box, a dark oracle whose unsealed testimony has the horror's revenge, often a murder ballad, opera, or ghost story that conjures up hellish voices mid-thena glossia, e.g. Rashomon, Ringu, and The Grudge, etc., from Japanese stories, 1950, 1998, and 2004, and various ghost stories from the West's own Ghost of the Counterfeit, all weaken state power by reversing objection to lopsided conversations that unfold during revolutionary cryptonomy, denuding a given case, state secrets, protecting rapists and patriarchy's other benefactors, i.e. black penitents in and out of Gothic sex, drugs, and rock and roll, e.g. D4VD and the murder of Celeste Revius Hernandez in 2026, echoing Beauvoir and Sartre's Lolita syndrome, and raping of students under their own power imbalance, 2013. States rape, by design, primarily nature and those of it, re extended beings as things to gaslight, gatekeep, girlboss under toxic formats, and scapegoat. We iconoclasts, whistleblowers expose them, and cops and judges protecting them, doing little Gothic BDSM, acting out the ghosts of rape, Hamlet style, but for women and other marginalities, making Medusa understood, again, but keeping her numinous, abject, divine, re from Varma and Otto to me, 1917 to 2023, mid-cryptonomy. What was she wearing? Dead men might tell no tales. Of female and or monstrous feminine ghosts are a bit more chatty, re seeing dead people. Say cheese. Triple gangers, Possessor, official audio 2024, cited modularity and class. You are listening to Possessor from the full-length album, the debut by Danish doom trio Triple Ganger. Good album. I could a tale unfold whose lightest word would harrow up thy soul, freeze thy young blood, make thy two eyes like stars start from their spheres, thy knotted and combined locks to part, and each particular hair to stand and end like quills upon the fearful porpentine. Source, Hamlet, circa 1599. There's power in that the state can't monopolize. Use it. Footnote number 18 regarding Regina K. Walters, who Mom had me paint once, not just hanging the portrait on her store wall, but keeping it up despite the customers complaining. Also, Regina was killed at age 14 by a serial killer truck driver who took the above photograph before killing her, and Mom, who already has a thing for truck drivers of whom she relied on when hitchhiking as a homeless teenager, knew someone her age from Ann Arbor killed by a truck driver too. Spookier still, this girl looked just like Mom. Creepy. Such things are tragically commonplace in and out of Gothic stories, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, pimping women, nature as monstrous feminine as usual, but inside whose buried stories are as front and center as a catchy chorus. Ari from the Origins of Demonic Persecution and Camp 2025. Lyric Discord writes, in an interview and also in the VH1 special I mentioned, Anne revealed that the Magic Man was her then boyfriend band manager Michael Fisher, and that was part of the song as an autobiographical telling of the beginnings of their relationship. From Wikipedia, Michael was originally Heart's guitarist and then followed Michael to Canada during the Vietnam War years so he wouldn't get drafted. In 1974, Nancy joined the band later, and Michael then became the band's manager and sound engineer. Source, Magic Man by Heart, 2018. Equally common is their representation by polite society outside of Gothic, hence the rememory process in cryptomimesis, a process I should add that Marx wasn't above. A spectre is haunting Europe, the spectre of communism. To be a good communist is to be an anarchist barometer for mostly invisible spirits displaced, ephemerally abused in life by state powers, with me expanding cryptomimesis to other monsters in their language, but I digress, e.g. Amazons equal mighty warrior ghosts. Believe women and other survivors, e.g. drug abuse, drug use, abuse, child abuse, carceral violence, police brutality, and so on. Models, Melody Vanderwaard left, Henry Vanderwaard III right, Benjamin Vanderwaard bottom, Persephone and Henry Vanderwaard IV middle, left, and right. I'm not sure which one of us is which. Mom would know. So that would have been in 1986, nearly 40 years ago. God. Mom would have been 21, 22. Weird. Footnote 19. In my mother's case, she endured terrible things, a series thereof that cannot be described in polite company, and which she struggles to sometimes remember, to birth a little fighter me who also faced and survived her own great trauma, and who, born many weeks premature, was covered in hair, so much so that Mom called us twins, her little wolfmen, her own Romulus and Remus that, when I came out as trans, she accepted without question, the monster child only a mother could love, monsters and motherhood, a classic tocophobic trope to reverse abjection with, or a wandering womb, see following in Medusa's footsteps, footnote A. Footnote 5a. Footnote 20, regarding Foucault and Edward Said. Mom also hates Foucault, but loves hates Edward Said, leading me to write essays about both men. Ari Zool, similar to Obama and his bad faith sexual conquests, gleefully showing me Foucault's twink predation, to unironically prey on me. I feel like I fucked Obama with a face mask, source leaving the closet. In the words of Darren Ewing from Troll 2, oh my god! Gothic invites the ability to laugh at our mishaps, turning disaster into delight post hoc, while still warning about toxic love in danger disco ways. So whatever devilry Zool used when charming off my pants, I can celebrate their teaching me witchcraft all the same, i.e. how to slay pussy in ways I tweaked, meaning to prevent harm, e.g. by reflecting their own bogus nature, i.e. non-magical damsels and detectives. Enchant this, bitch. Artist Persephone Vanderwaard cited Interrogating Power Through Your Own Camp, Understanding Vampires and Ghostbusters Afterlife and Empire 2022 for essays on Edward Said, and Ari Real Life, Toxic Love and Criminal Sexuality and True Crime, featuring killing, stalking, Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy. An extension of the detective side of Gothic fiction, Ari Radcliffe's Refrain, and one that often sees a variety of thefts taking place on and off stage. In the above example featuring material written by James Somerton, a famous charlatan and thief eventually exposed for epic levels of plagiarism, Ari from Criminal Sexuality and True Crime. Note, this piece was originally made in response to the James Somerton videos Killing, Stalking, and The Romancing of Abuse, and The Troubling Thirst for Jeffrey Dahmer, 2023. Said videos are re-uploads, as Somerton, now self-described as James of Telos, a connection to his now-defunct film company scam enterprise Telos Pictures, removed them from his YouTube channel, also defunct. In other words, I wrote this piece in early to mid-2023, before James was exposed as a giant plagiarist, which I responded to after it happened. R.E. James Somerton, a guy who sucked, but so does capitalism, 2024. Also, from what I understand, the above essays that I cite were actually written not by James, but by his editor, co-writer, and former friend, Nicholas Hergott, who wasn't involved, as far as I understand, in James's bullshit. Source, Reddit, r/hbomberguy. Source tweet, Dan Olson, 2023, cited James Somerton, a guy who sucked, but so does capitalism. And these are a bunch of things that James Somerton stole. That's a lot. And when I say stole, I mean he cited them like in block quotes without saying that they were someone else's. In short, passing them off like they were his. Like a vampire, metaphorically speaking. The problem is always capitalism and state vampirism, Darwin obscurantism, but some people embody that better or worse than others.